This is lesson 9 in my series of piano tutorials for complete beginners that's running throughout 2017. If you're just dropping in here for the first time, you're going to find it really useful to start from lesson 1. So please do check out the playlist link that I'm going to put right underneath this video, okay? Because that will give you access to every single tutorial in the series. In this tutorial, we're going to start off by doing a quick check through of the piece that I gave you to work on in the last tutorial, tutorial 8. Then, as I said in tutorial 8, we're going to learn more about the concept of key, which is massively important in music theory, okay? After that, we're also going to have another new piece to work on. So there's quite a lot to cover. Let's get going. So you might recall that in tutorial 8 I played this piece through for you, but I did it with the score on the screen, and rather sneakily I didn't let you see what my fingers were up to. That was kind of deliberate because I wanted you to have to figure out stuff like fingering from the score rather than just copying what I was doing, okay? What I'm going to do now is play it through nice and slowly so that you can see what I'm doing, and that way you can kind of check that you were getting it right. Here goes. So you'll notice that I played the repeat there, and I wasn't massively musical. I was kind of bashing it out a little bit in the hope that you could see my fingers nice and clearly. I'm actually pretty pleased with that, actually. It's quite a nice little tune, and I won't say much more about it, but as with everything we've covered so far, do keep coming back to it and giving it a little bit of a practice. Focus on the dynamics and the musicality, and keep an eye in particular on those phrase marks sweeping above the right hand. Try to think about the phrasing as you play. It's worth saying though that you shouldn't treat any phrase mark, or in fact any expressive direction, as absolutely iron law. There are other ways that you could phrase that right hand melody, okay? I just happen to think that the one that I've marked is a good one, but do feel free to play around for yourself. Okay, now that's sorted, let's get stuck into this idea of key. It's actually an idea you might have come across before because people often talk about songs being in major keys, yeah, or in minor keys. Or you might hear of such and such a piece of music being in the key of G major or the key of F minor, yeah? What is that all about? What key comes down to is the notes and the chords that composers use to create a piece of music. Now we've already looked at a couple of scales, C major and G major. Scales are really essential to keys. If we say a song is in C major, then it will mostly, not necessarily exclusively, but mostly use notes taken from the scale of C major. If we say it's in G major, yeah, it will mostly use notes taken from the scale of G major. Yeah. Here's a really important idea. If a song is in a major key, then you can move it around, transpose it, to use a technical term, to any other major key without fundamentally changing it, okay? Let me show you what I mean. Here's the melody of My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean in C major. Okay. Notice that it doesn't start on C, by the way, but it does end on C. And the note a tune ends on is always a big clue to its key, because it's almost always the note that the key takes its name from, okay? So now let's transpose it and play it in G major. that it's exactly the same piece of music but just shifted to a different pitch, to a different key. Yeah. You might also notice that a black note has appeared, F sharp. And you'll recall that F sharp is the black note that appears in the scale of G major, because our melody now is using the scale of G major as its source for notes. Okay. So any major excuse me, any major key melody can be transposed to any other major key. Any minor key melody, we'll come on to minors in a later tutorial, any minor key melody can be transposed to any other minor key. The only thing you can't do is transpose major to minor or minor to major. At least you can't do it without changing the piece of music in a fairly dramatic and noticeable way. Now, key can be a bit more complicated than that, especially when we think about classical music, because, you know, in classical music especially, or even in, you know, in a lot of songs, you can move from one key to another within the course of a piece of music. But for now, let's just think about pieces of music that are all in one key. The question we have to deal with is, how does musical notation deal with key? How does it show us which key we're in? Okay, here's the melody line to My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, scored out in the key of G, pretty much as I just played it. Now, what do you notice? Yeah, that's right. We have this sharp sign here at the start of each stave. That's what we call a key signature, and unlike a time signature, which usually only appears at the start of the first stave, it appears at the start of every single stave in the piece of music. You'll see that it's on the F line up here, and it tells us that every single F we come across we should play as an F sharp, unless we're told otherwise. And that doesn't just include Fs on the top line, the one that has the sharp sign, but it includes the F in the space here, and any high or low Fs that, you know, might be marked above or below the stave on ledger lines. Okay. So this key signature says, unless you know, every F you play it as an F sharp unless you're told otherwise, which would usually be with a natural sign. We looked briefly at natural signs in the last tutorial. So this F sharp, the combination of the F sharp and the final note being G, tells us we're in the key of G major. The key signature by itself doesn't tell us that, because it's also the key signature for E minor, which is what we call the relative minor key of G major. We'll go into that in future tutorials, but we can tell this is G major because of the combination of the key signature, the final G, and the overall major sound of the tune. Yeah, okay, remember we talked last week about the broad difference between major and minor. So major is happy or bright, and minor is sad or dark. And My Bonnie, okay, is mainly sort of bright. Yeah, it's not a dark. It's not sort of okay. It's definitely in a major key. While we're looking at this, by the way, there are just a few other things that you won't have seen before that I'm just going to take the opportunity to mention by way of a bit of a trailer for stuff we're going to cover in the next few tutorials. The first is this bar at the start that only has one note in it. That's what we call a pickup bar, and you get those when the rhythm of a piece demands that it starts partway through a bar. Okay, in this case it's the last beat of a 3-beat bar, okay, because this note, the second note, yeah, needs to be on the downbeat at the start of the bar. So if you imagine counting in, you would go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, this single beat pickup bar is kind of compensated for by a bar right at the end here that only has 2 beats. Okay, you don't always see that, but strictly speaking, it's what you're supposed to do. The next thing you won't have seen is this minim here and this one here that have dots after them. Yeah, okay, the dot is after the note, not above it or below it, which means something else, but it's after the note. Now, a dot after any note always lengthens it by half. So an ordinary minim in a 3-beat bar would only take up 2 of the 3 beats, but this dotted minim, rather than being 2 beats long, is half as long again, which is 3 beats, so it fills the entire 3-beat bar. And then this final thing we've got down here is a tie. Yeah, now ties kind of do what they say on the tin. It just ties these 2 notes together. So this dotted minim is 3 beats and this crotchet is 1 beat. But if we tie them, if we tie them together, we get a single note of 4 beats going across the bar line. So the final phrase from here goes something like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 off. Okay, so I held on, I didn't play 2 notes there, I played it all as 1 note but tied together and then came off after the second note had finished sounding, as it were. Don't worry too much if all that sounds kind of madly complicated. As I say, we're going to be going into it in more detail in the next few tutorials. It's just that this stuff happens to crop up in My Bonnie, which is otherwise a really good example of what we're talking about here. So I thought I'd just mention it now. Now, your homework assignment for this tutorial is to have a go at this short piece of music that I've written for you in the key of G major. As usual, you'll find it fully scored out in this lesson's accompanying PDF. Just head to the link underneath the video to find that. Now, in tutorial 8, I played you the piece but only showed you the music without showing you my hands. This week, I'm not even going to do that. This should be a bit of a challenge. I want you to try as best you can to work it out purely from the score. That is supposed to be difficult. Don't worry if you find that really hard work. We're all about challenging you here. There's nothing in the piece that you haven't seen already. Okay, I think there's a dotted minim in there somewhere. I've just been talking about dotted notes, so you should be able to handle that. But there's nothing major and dramatic and new in there. So, you know, with a little bit of work, you should be able to make some progress. And as usual, at the start of the next tutorial, I can play it through so you can check how you did. As well as that piece, keep practicing the scales of C major and G major, and in the next tutorial we're going to be looking at a couple of new scales. By the way, just before we go, a few of you have been in touch asking about where you can find other stuff to practice your newfound skills on, other pieces of straightforward piano music. That's cool because pretty soon you'll need to branch out and play more than just the example pieces I'm using here. Unfortunately, it's actually pretty difficult to find beginners piano music that isn't kind of, you know, a bit childish, a bit over simple, a bit you know, a bit kind of nursery rhymish. But have a look round, take yourself to a music store and flick through some of the easy stuff. You know, see if you can, you know, you think you can manage it. You can always look up concepts we haven't covered yet. Yeah, though, you know, we have covered quite a lot of what you'll need. Or have a browse online. There are quite a few online music stores. One thing that I'm going to do once I've covered just a few more concepts in these tutorials is actually put out a PDF of repertoire pieces, maybe just kind of half a dozen of them that you can take away and work on for yourself if you feel you kind of need an extension task. We're not quite at that point yet, but we're pretty close, maybe in a couple of tutorials time. In the meantime, happy practicing. Do subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, buttons down there. And if you would like to support what I'm doing here for just a very small amount each month, please do check out my Patreon crowdfunding campaign at patreon.com/Bill Hilton. The link, as usual, is below. I would really appreciate that. Okay, I hope you're enjoying the tutorials. I'll see you next time.